Let's get more analysis now from Abbas Aslani, who joins us live from inside Tehran. He's a journalist and also a senior research fellow at the Center for Middle East Strategic Studies. It is great to have you this morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Paula, for having me.
If we could, just give me a general sense of what you're seeing in Tehran. What are people telling you? I've read reports that the ferocity of the attacks caught many people by surprise there on Friday.
Paula, after the initial shock that came on early Friday morning, Iran tried to recover, and we were seeing that the air defense, including in Tehran and other cities, were trying to actively engage with the hostile targets coming from the Israeli side or those, let's say, drones flying over sky. And, the feeling this time comparing to previous exchanges in the past between Iran and Israel is a bit different. There's a sense of war going on between the two sides. The high-ranking officials are using the term war, just a limited conflict between the two sides. And that's why this situation is a bit more serious. And as of the latest round of attacks from the Israeli side yesterday, which targeted residential complexes and areas, some people in the capital city have been trying to avoid unnecessary commute, but they are doing their normal life. However, they somehow, it seemed that by yesterday attacks, Israel wanted to create a sense of fear and intimidate the population in order to, somehow create a kind of chaos. But government has been trying to handle the situation, and in terms of the power, electricity, or things like that, water, it's in the normal condition. And in the meantime, we have been seeing from the Iranian side that gradually they have been trying to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of their attacks against Israel. Specifically, last night they tried to use newer missiles and more missiles reportedly. And the Iranian officials, when they are talking, they have been not talking about a specific time for the end of this conflict, but they hint that this might continue in future, and if it continues, it will, become more crushing, and it will escalate into a, let's say, more complicated situation. And this indicates that. But why is that? Because when we are looking at the public in the country and in the capital city, we are seeing that this external threat coming from the Israeli side and this aggression has made different factions and different types of people to rally around the flag. And I was talking to even some people who are critical of the establishment and the government. They may not agree with the government on many issues, and they have been critical of the establishment, but all agree in one thing, that Iran needs to give a crushing response to Israel to establish a deterrence against any likely or potential attacks or aggression coming from the Israeli side, and let's say unity among different political factions as well as the ordinary people.
So, and we only have about a minute more of your time here, Abbas. So essentially what you're hearing from your perspective as a journalist, there does seem to be this widespread support among Iranians when it comes to that initial preemptive round of strikes that Iran launched on Israel, if I'm hearing you correct?
Yes, this has created a kind of unity among the public, supporting the Iranian defense forces and government to retaliate against Israel. And nobody's buying into Iran that, Benjamin Netanyahu is going after, Iran's nuclear program, because residential areas, as well as more than 90% of those victims of the attack have been civilians. And yesterday, many people, they saw there by their own eyes that, ordinary people were targeted. So that's why this has created a unity in the country. And following the what happened in Gaza, Israel does not have a good standing among the Iranian public. And this somehow, this recent aggression against Iran has increase the level of unpopularity of Israel among Iranians. That's why we could say that the majority of the Iranian people are supporting that response against Israel, and they are demanding for more crushing response. One is that because they maybe hate the actions by Israel, but secondly, they want the Iranian side to establish a deterrence against any likely future attacks.
Israel's defense minister has vowed, quote, "The residents of Tehran will pay the price, and soon." Now, Israeli officials say at least 23 people have been killed since Iran's retaliation started. In Iran, at least 224 people have been killed by Israeli airstrikes since Friday, and that's according to the country's Ministry of Health. The IDF vowing their strikes will become even more intense, and Iran's president says that the country's response will escalate as well.
We will continue to intensify our operations and, in doing so, strengthen our security for years to come. Defending our home front is a critical component of this campaign.
We are by no means seeking to expand the war, but naturally, as our army, our powerful IRGC, and our dear people have shown, appropriate responses have been given so far. The more they try to escalate, naturally, the responses will become tougher and more severe. More innocent people may lose their lives.
CNN's chief international security correspondent, Nick Pate-Walsh, joining me live now from London. Nick, it's good to have you this morning. In your view here, where does President Trump fit into this as the escalation continues to grow? He seems to be both offering peace talks, but he also continues to back Israel. So where does this potential road for diplomacy land?
Yeah, I mean, it's been particularly opaque to work out exactly what the Trump administration wanted prior to this, and now it appears that they label these Israeli strikes as very successful, exactly what they think their future position may end up being here. But President Trump, over the past hours, has said that the Iranians are talking, suggested that perhaps there could be a deal here. And I think for the moment now, while it appears that, as far as we know publicly, the United States is not materially involved in these Israeli strikes, that they may be holding themselves out as a potential off-ramp for some kind of diplomatic de-escalation here. Now, clearly, there were suggestions overnight too that an Israeli thought to kill the Iranian supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, may have been something that was vetoed by the United States. And so there are suggestions potentially that the Trump administration is maybe trying to have it both ways, suggest they have some sense of control or veto power over exactly what Israel does, while at the same time aren't necessarily trying to call all the moves here. So Trump, I think, trying to have it both ways. There may be voices around him that are indeed suggesting that as Israel continues to take a remarkable, a devastating toll, frankly, not just on Iran's military, but according to Iranian officials, on Iranian civilians as well, over 200 killed, that maybe at this point we're seeing Trump holding himself out as the mechanism through which Iran can suggest that it might want to come to a negotiating table here. It may already be perhaps approaching that particular idea, but it is tough for Tehran, given the damage done to their senior command here, given the damage done to their military, to potentially, from that position of weakness, try and find some kind of diplomatic end to this. And I'm sure Israel too, as it continues to prosecute targets, over 250 as far as we know, just up until Sunday afternoon inside of Iran, continues to look for weaknesses to exploit in Iran's military, for the sites from which these missiles are indeed launched will continue to degrade Iran's military. And so there may be less of an incentive in the immediate days ahead for Israel, particularly given the continued barrage from Iran against Israeli cities, which has killed 8 just overnight, for Israel to necessarily find an immediate off-ramp in diplomacy here. But we see this escalation day by day continue. The ultimate question, Polo, being exactly what the infantries in both sides are, the interceptors to stop Iranian missiles and indeed the Iranian missiles themselves, to this kind of pace of back and forth to be continued.
Yeah, in the last hour I spoke to a professor and expert on Middle Eastern studies, offering a very sobering view, which is he sees no light at the end of the tunnel, which basically sounds very similar to what we're hearing right now. Nick, in your view, though, will there be a potential back and forth? You have the G7 that's playing out right now. Several of the nations involved were involved in the initial deal to limit Iran's nuclear capabilities. Does that perhaps offer a measure of hope that we'll see that diplomatic solution you mentioned?
I mean, it's an exceptionally different Iranian nuclear program. It seems that we're going to be seeing negotiations centre around, if those were to happen in the days ahead. They have sustained, it seems, some significant damage to some of their plants. We don't know at this point if that's impeded their enrichment programs. We obviously know that publicly Iran says it does not want a nuclear weapon. And so there'll have to, of course, be continued discussions about what parts of any program that indeed exists are still functional, that could be monitored. But I think we're into a new era in terms of that discussion because of the extent of the strikes that Israel has carried out, not just on the nuclear facilities we know about, but the nuclear brain trust, so to speak. So many Iranian nuclear scientists and experts killed as part of this too. So any time I think of future discussions will be in a very different climate, clearly where Israel is saying it has air superiority over to Iran, and indeed if that is even half, fractionally the case, the damage they will be able to do to Iran's military, to their nuclear program, for whatever future means, it will have been extraordinary. And I'm sure at the moment now Tehran is simply trying to assess exactly the extent of the damage.